I'm from Amazon Prime Video with Lorena, the new docuseries that shares Lorena Bobbitt's side of the story and investigates the headlines and press coverage 25 years later. Lorena, streaming February 15th on Amazon Prime Video.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Speer. The head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, announced his resignation today. As NPR's Miles Parks reports, Brock Long led the agency for about a year and a half, a period when a number of major storms ravaged the U.S.
Long led the federal response to Hurricanes Harvey in Texas, Maria in Puerto Rico, and Florence in the Carolinas. FEMA's response to Maria under Long's watch was particularly criticized. The storm led to nearly 3,000 deaths, and local officials in Puerto Rico called FEMA's response inadequate. Separately, a report last year by the Inspector General for the Department of Homeland Security found that Long improperly used government vehicles and resources to travel back to his home in North Carolina. He was ordered to reimburse the government for the spending. Deputy Administrator Pete Gaynor will become the acting head of FEMA upon Long's departure. Miles Parks, NPR News, Washington.
Sexual assaults at U.S. military academies are on the rise, and those leading the academies are facing tough questions as they went before the House Armed Services Committee today. Here's NPR's Greg Myrie.
An anonymous survey at the Army, Navy, and Air Force academies found 747 students reporting unwanted sexual contact in the past school year, up nearly 50% from a similar survey 2 years earlier. Lieutenant General Jay Silveria is superintendent at the Air Force Academy.
The survey data shows that our cadets have been harmed and that too many feel they can't come forward for help and support.
In the past, military officials attributed growing numbers of reports to an increasing willingness of victims to speak up. Now, military leaders say they're frustrated that prevention programs have not reduced excessive drinking and sexual assaults. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Washington.
President Donald Trump says his group will be looking for landmines when they review the text of a border security agreement, though at the moment Trump seems inclined to sign it. Hammered out by congressional negotiators this week, the agreement would keep the government open but only provide a fraction of the money Trump's been demanding for his border wall. Speaking to a gathering of law enforcement officials in Washington today, Trump said he'll be taking a very serious look at the deal.
As we review the new proposal from Congress, I can promise you this: I will never waver from my sacred duty to defend this nation and its people. We will get the job done.
Trump has been signaling his desire to avoid another government shutdown following a 35-day partial shutdown that left hundreds of thousands of federal workers without paychecks. Officials from two of the nation's big wireless carriers, T-Mobile and Sprint, faced a grilling today from lawmakers concerned about how a planned merger between the two would impact rural customers. The two companies have said they would tie the knot in a proposed $26 billion deal. On Wall Street today, the Dow is up 117 points to 25,543. The Nasdaq rose 5 points. The S&P 500 gained 8 points. This is NPR. Jeans maker Levi Strauss & Company says it's hoping to raise upwards of $100 million through an initial public offering. The company says the number of shares and the price range is yet to be determined. Levi Strauss began making jeans in 1873 and was a public company from 1971 to 1985 when it was taken private in a leveraged buyout. In its latest reporting period, the company earned $283.1 million. The company's shares will be listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol LEVI. After years of being NASA's robotic envoy to Mars, Opportunity is done. NASA made a final call to the veteran Mars rover, but no answer. NPR's Joe Palca says the space agency is now formally ending the mission.
Last June, a giant dust storm swept over Opportunity, essentially blotting out the sun and preventing the rover's solar panels from generating power. Mission managers had hoped the rover would wake up when the storm abated. It didn't. They sent hundreds of commands hoping that one of them would spark the rover to life. They didn't. So now, more than 15 years after a successful landing, NASA is calling it quits. Not bad for a mission that was originally scheduled to last 90 days. Opportunity has returned a trove of valuable data about Mars. It's one of the missions that's helped show that water was once more plentiful on what is now an extremely dry planet. Joe Palca, NPR News.
J.D. Power is out with its annual survey of vehicle reliability, with Japanese automaker Lexus taking top honors for the 8th straight year, tying for the number 2 spot were Porsche and Toyota, followed by Chevrolet and Buick. I'm Jack Speer, NPR News in Washington.
Did you know you can ask Google Home to play NPR podcasts for you? It's easy. Just ask. like play the Fresh Air podcast. Use Google Home or Google Assistant to connect with your favorite shows anytime.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour. And we are back. Thank y'all so much for being here for the second hour. I am so fortunate to be interviewing Dr. Chuck Kennedy, who is someone I admire so much. The work that he does matters. It is just so imperative. The people that he works with, the members of Project Psi, I'm fortunate enough to know and care a lot about some of them. They do beautiful work, and they are all about the people that they're trying to help. So if you missed the first hour, no worries. You can find our archives on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Podbean, and other places around the internet. We are on Icecast, so we are on all kinds of directory streaming. So thank you again, Chuck, for being here with me. I am having the best time having this conversation with you. And as promised, we actually had to take the break before we had Charlie's answer. Had the answer for Charlie. He was not here in the beginning of the show. He was a little late getting in. I understand Windows is having some issues, so thank God for Safari. And the question of Charlie is, what is your doctorate in? And if he can ask a metaphysical question.
My PhD is in neuroscience. I started in healthcare as a registered nurse, and at the time I was running as a director of nursing of memory care units in Alzheimer's facilities. And I wanted to understand more about the neurophysiology of dementia and the different types of dementia. So I went and got a PhD in neuroscience. And at that point, I decided this was, if I recall, it was June 25th, 2012 was when the American Alzheimer's Association declared that they have no clue what's causing it. All of the research on Alzheimer's up to that point was useless. The tangles of plaques were not what they thought they were. So they were starting from scratch. Well, needless to say, that cut their funding big time. And they really were starting over from scratch. So I was a nurse. My goal was my patients. I wanted what was best for my patients. So having worked with over 10,000 dementia patients, I put together a system of assessing the patient with a plan for the families. And it was called There's No Place Like Home, because Dorothy was right. There is no place like home, especially for dementia care.
Yes.
If you can have the facility, can do it safely, there's no place like home for a dementia patient. And I put this assessment, and the biggest problem with dementia is families want to believe that mom and dad are better than they are.
Yes,
and
absolutely
that's why,
true.
Yeah, 60% of dementia patients will wander off, and I would do talks to families, and they go, no, mom's not that bad. And a week later, they call me, Mom walked away. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And I go, is she right-handed or left-handed? She's right-handed. Okay, start your search priority, but when you walk out of your house and hit the main sidewalk, go to your right, because that's the way she went. And now we were able to cut their search grid in half. And when I did this, basically the assessment is I put a picture of a house, a stick house, in front of the patient, give them a blank piece of paper and tell them, copy this exactly. And when they copy it, you can see that maybe the whole thing is off to one side, and they have a left side or a right side deficit. Well, why is that important? They can't see the entire plate you put in front of them. I'd have families go, Mom won't drink her juice with dinner. I go, put it on the other side of the plate. She can't see it over there. She only eats half her food. Well, halfway through dinner, turn her plate around, so now everything's on the same side she ate from. And this way they can see everything better. because the brain literally has a right or left side deficit. They'll sit there and the address block is 1, 2, 3. And they'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all across the page.
Yes.
And that's a sign for separation. So there's this simple 5-minute, let them draw the picture of the house, aside from giving me clues at where they're at, so we can tell, I can tell the family they're at this level, and because of this is what you need to watch for next. And no, don't let Dad drive the car. Oh, well, he just takes it out of the garage. And a week later, they call me, yeah, the car's in the living room across the street. Dad took it out of the garage. And so all these kind of things happen, and my goal was to help the patient and the families. And that's why I got the degree in neuroscience. And then when I retired, after 50 years of ghost hunting and working with mediums, I wanted to know. I don't believe in ghosts. I want to know, and I do know now because I've proved it. But I wanted to see, how does a medium work? How does their brain actually work? And that's when I set up Project Psi with the EEGs and the monitoring of over 400 demographics and biometrics. And while I'm testing them, we monitor all these things. And one of the interesting things is I knew a lot of psychics before I started Project Psi, and many of them had fibromyalgia. And I thought, well, I'm going to do a health history questionnaire. And on the health questionnaire, I expected to find that there'd be a lot of fibros. Well, 47% of the 700-something psychics I tested have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And this was diagnosed by their doctor, not by Google.
Wow.
And and the thing is, in the general population, only half of 1% of the population test positive for fibromyalgia, but 47% of psychics do. And with the rest of the questionnaire, I found that many have Hashimoto's, a thyroid condition. They have Graves' disease, another thyroid condition. They also have chronic fatigue syndrome. These are all autoimmune diseases. 87.3%.
I have a question. In lieu of what we were talking about earlier, I have Hashimoto's. I had Graves' disease, which was treated. And so now I have very low thyroid function and Hashimoto's. But what do you think the physiology of fibromyalgia would have to do with psychic abilities?
I don't know. That's where I'm going from here. After doing a 2.5-year study and finding out that 87.3% of psychics have an autoimmune disease, there's got to be something to it. Which came first, the autoimmune disease or the gifts? Of this, as I said, 87.3%, 13% have not been diagnosed. But in interviewing them, many of them, over 10% of the 13%, have all the symptoms. They just never got diagnosed because they didn't have the health insurance or they didn't have the opportunity to get exposed to the healthcare system, so they don't know. But the reality is 87% of over 700 psychics have autoimmune disease. There has to be a connection. Now, autoimmune disease in general is a very vague thing. Medicine knows very little about autoimmune diseases. They don't like to admit that. And the other thing is 96% of the psychics I tested were women, 4% were men. 75% of autoimmune diseases attack women. So clearly, I think there's a gender trend here that can't be overlooked. I just don't. I don't know the correlation yet, and that's where I want to go from here. I got my results. I got my numbers. I see the trend. Now I need to dig deeper, and that's where in 2019, that's one of the things Project Psi is planning on, because we need to see which came first, the autoimmune or the gifts. And
I would say the gifts.
I have to